And we're back. You know, we take it for granted that members of the LGBT community are out on air, such as this show, and out in newsrooms. But there was a time when it wasn't safe, much less hip or cool, to be out in the newsroom. Today we're going to speak with David Steinberg, the president of the NLGJA, the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you just celebrated 20 years as an organization serving the needs of LGBT journalists. What has changed in 20 years?
A lot has changed, and a lot is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Our basic mission hasn't changed. Fair and accurate coverage of the LGBT community, helping people be out in the newsroom and support them, and offering programming and support for members, and opposing newsroom bias of all sorts.
Right.
But that is what that means has changed over 20 years. Whereas 20 years ago, when Roy Aarons founded the organization, it really was difficult to be out in a lot of newsrooms. And while we're not completely there, I think for most people in most places, it's a lot easier to be out in the newsroom. So the mission of fair and accurate coverage is always important. And again, I think the coverage has gotten much better over the last 21 years that we've been around, but there are still issues.
Right.
A lot of what we do now in terms of helping members be out in the newsroom is helping people stay employed so that they can be a voice in the newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I work at the Chronicle, and we've seen a lot of people leave over the last few years. So having those diverse voices in the newsroom and making sure that people are equipped and able to have a voice is what's really important. So we're doing a lot of professional development.
Right. I remember when Roy Aarons, then editor of the Oakland Tribune, started the NLGJA. We had met through a precursor of the organization. And boy, having an out editor, especially at the Oakland Tribune, was considered quite something. And there was active pushback when NLGJA got founded.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there weren't openly gay journalists in newspapers or television stations or radio stations in all 50 states. Are there now, or are there still some papers in parts of the country where being out is not just not accepted, but actually not safe?
I think there are definitely still places where people don't feel comfortable being out, and part of that is an internal thing, I think. I think sometimes people are surprised at the level of support that people have, or the level of, I don't really care if you're a good journalist. But it definitely has changed over 21 years. You know, we're having our conference at the end of the month, and Don Lemon, who's a CNN anchor, just came out recently, just put out a book, and he's going to be speaking. And you know, so for him, it was a journey. Even though CNN's a very supportive organization, and there are they've supported us for years, and we have one of our vice presidents works in the organization, works at CNN, but he didn't sort of officially come out until just a few months ago.
Right. What do you think is the relationship between the quote-unquote LGBT press and journalists such as yourself who are openly gay but work in the quote-unquote mainstream press? I mean, there was a time when gay journalism was considered more advocacy than journalism. Do you think that's changed?
Yes and no. I think there's definitely a place for more advocacy in the LGBT press, just like there is in you know, the Spanish language press or the black press. And that's always, I think it used to be more of a tension in our organization. I'd like to think that it isn't as much now. This year we're doing, we have an LGBT media summit. The first day of the conference is actually devoted all to LGBT press, all day long, issues that are of particular importance and relevance to the LGBT press, and it's the 8th year we've done that. So the issues are the same, but the issues are different.
Right. What is the most newsworthy? I mean, if you had to say right now, if we're tracking stories that are of interest or concern, not exclusively, but in the majority, LGBT issues in the LGBT community, what is the most newsworthy issue right now that pops up? I mean, for a while it seemed like every gay story automatically meant an AIDS story.
Yeah, I think I'd have to say it's marriage equality and all the issues surrounding that, from taxes to immigration to constitutional amendments in states to all the things that follow from that. And again, it's I think the coverage has gotten much better over the years. I think the language has, people get it. You know, it's not a gay lifestyle,
Yeah.
you know, it's a sexual orientation, and they don't talk about someone's husband who was married, you know, in Massachusetts. The person was married, that's the husband, that's,
Right.
you know.
How difficult do you think that is for non-gay journalists to get? I know that when I travel with my husband, or when I lecture, you know, I'll mention my husband or my spouse, and I'm always very careful to use the exact same language and the exact same phraseology that non-gay couples do. But every now and then you'll see someone look at us like, well, why don't you explain it? I'm like, how do you make a non-gay person get it?
Part of it is a language evolution. I think more people, again, are getting it these days. One of the things I do at the Chronicle is I'm the editor of the style book. So, you know, how we refer to people and what we capitalize and things like that. And I remember we added transgender definitions in language years ago. It was actually just after Gwen Arao was or just before Gwen Arao was killed.
The notorious case of a transgender teen that was murdered here in the Bay Area.
And we actually, I wanted to do that, and it happened to be before that happened. And the reporters were very careful, and they wanted to make sure they did the right thing. And actually, I kind of goofed because we had good language, and then it referred to another section, an older section of the style book that actually had bad language, and so the reporter used the wrong pronoun, and then was confused and felt bad about it, and people were upset. It's like we actually did try to do the right thing, and I think people generally, a good journalist wants to report accurately, and I think kind of like coming out. You know, people say, well, you know, my parents are they're having a hard time, and why aren't they being more accepting? And you know, the response is, well, it took you more than, you know, a week to be comfortable with it. Give them a little bit of time. And I think the same sort of thing has happened. I remember years ago, the Chronicle used to be a sponsor of the Pride Parade. So we had these great T-shirts that says, you know, we come out every day.
Sunday.
We come out every day.
Sorry.
Yeah, love those shirts. And a guy from my gym was working on a same-sex marriage thing, and this was 10 years ago, and he thought the T-shirt was cool, so he wanted to swap them with me. And I thought, oh, that's neat. I'm like, and I remember thinking, well, that's a great idea, but it's not going to happen, you know, anytime soon. And then, you know, suddenly, in the history of the gay rights movement, marriage equality has just exploded. It, you know, 10 years ago, if you said, you know, however many thousands of people were married in same-sex, you know, relationship, I wouldn't have believed it. You know.
Has it surprised you?
Oh yeah, I think. But again, but now it seems perfect. Well, it always seemed perfectly natural and normal. But now it seems expected.
Right.
Well, why don't you accept the fact that, you know, my husband and I will be together 25 years in January.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we got married in our backyard during that little window. So. He is my husband.
Yeah,
we just celebrated our 3rd anniversary.
Yeah, it's like,
nice.
People always say, how long have you been married? I'm like, well, it depends on who you ask. We say 13 years, the state of California says 2, so, you know, go figure. I know that for myself, living in the Bay Area for the last 25 years, the G and the L of our community has always been kind of there for us to embrace. But the B and the T really has been an educational process for myself. How has covering the bisexual and the transgender community changed in the newsrooms, and how have your perceptions as a journalist changed around that?
Quite honestly, I would say, and I haven't done an exhaustive research on it, but I would say there is virtually no coverage of the bi community, of bisexuality. And maybe it's happening in other places, but I don't tend to see a lot of it. I've seen a lot more coverage of trans issues, and I think a lot more people are aware of it. Whether it's, like I said, Gwen Arao killing, the AP, which is, you know, sort of the Bible of style for most newspapers. About the same time the Chronicle changed our style, they changed theirs as well to reflect proper pronoun usage and things like that. So I think the stories are getting out there a lot more. And I think more people, again, there might be a slight learning curve, but I think more people are doing a better job. We're not there completely, but I think by and large, certainly if you compare it to 5, 10, or 15 years ago, coverage is much better.
Right. In our last few seconds, tell me what you think was the most important story you ever did on GLBT issues.
That's hard to say because I'm a copy editor, so I don't write a lot of stories, but I see a lot of them every day in the paper.
Or one that you ever dealt with.
God, I think the coverage over Prop 8 was really very important, very historic, and fascinating, and by and large very well done. We had a panel at our conference in San Francisco last year, our 20th anniversary, and we had 4 reporters who covered the issue and just talked about the trial and what happened and what it meant and the implications, and it was just fascinating to hear
their perspective.
Yeah, because most of us aren't in a courtroom.
That's right. We've been speaking with David Steinberg, president of NLGJA. I'm David Perry. You've been watching 10%. Thanks so much.